I'm Lily, and for as long as I can remember, I was an accident my parents never quite forgave. My family didn't feel like a home. It felt like a system, one that revolved around a single center of gravity. My older brother, Ethan. Everything in our house bent toward him. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, orbited his needs, his dreams, his future. And I existed on the edges, barely noticed unless I caused inconvenience. They never said outright that they didn't want a daughter. They didn't have to. Their actions spoke fluently. My father was an accountant, a man who viewed life in columns and calculations. To him, Ethan was an investment, promising returns, prestige, continuation of the family name. I was an expense, recurring, unnecessary, regrettable. My mother was a kindergarten teacher, which makes this harder to explain to people. She knew how to nurture children. She just chose not to nurture me. Every ounce of warmth she had went to my brother. What was left for me felt rationed, mechanical and hollow. The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was structural. When I turned 8, I begged for a bicycle. Not an expensive one. Just a bright blue bike with silver streamers on the handlebars. I talked about it constantly. I circled it in catalogs. I imagined riding it up and down our street. On my birthday, my parents handed me a large box. My heart soared. Inside were encyclopedias. Knowledge is more valuable than toys, my father said flatly. A bike rusts. This will last. Later that afternoon, I watched from my bedroom window as my father taught Ethan how to throw a perfect spiral with a brand new football he'd bought him that same day. For no reason at all. They laughed together while I sat on my bed, surrounded by books I never asked for. That was the moment I learned something important. My wants were frivolous. Ethan's were celebrated. The pattern continued. In high school, I poured my soul into a science fair project, a solar-powered water purification system. I worked on it for months. It functioned flawlessly. Judges were impressed. Teachers praised me. My parents showed up late. My mother barely glanced at my project before drifting toward Ethan, who hadn't even participated. My father nodded once at my work and said, "That must have taken a while. Make sure you clean everything up afterward." They stayed 5 minutes. I won second place. The ribbon disappeared from the kitchen counter by morning. When Ethan turned 18, the difference became impossible to ignore. After a fancy dinner, my parents led us outside to reveal a brand new graphite gray sedan with a giant red bow on the hood. Reliable. Expensive. "This is for your future," my father said proudly. My mother cried. When it was my turn 2 years later, I didn't expect anything close to that. I'd already learned not to. But what I didn't expect was a mistake on wheels. The morning of my 18th birthday was quiet. No balloons, no cake. Just a plain envelope with a generic card and a $20 bill inside. Then my father said, "We have something else for you." Outside, hope flickered briefly. Parked at the curb was an ancient, rust-eaten blue hatchback. The paint was faded. One hubcap was missing. Rust crawled along the frame like rot. A sad bow drooped from the antenna. "This will get you where you need to go," my father said. "We got a good deal." I told myself to be grateful. I told myself it was better than nothing. I had no idea that this car wasn't just cheap. It was dangerous. And that my parents knew exactly what they were giving me. 2 weeks later, on a crowded highway, I would realize the brakes didn't work, and that this wasn't an accident. At first, I tried to convince myself the car was fine. Oh yes, ugly definitely. Fine. That belief lasted about 10 minutes into my first drive. The engine rattled like loose silverware in a drawer. Every bump in the road felt exaggerated, as if the suspension was held together by hope alone. The brakes were soft, not dangerously bad, just unreliable. I mentioned it casually to my father that evening. "That's how older cars feel," he said without looking up from his laptop. "You just have to pump the brakes." So I did. For 2 weeks I drove cautiously. I avoided highways. I left extra distance between myself and other cars. I told myself I could fix it over time. I was studying engineering after all. Maybe this would be my project. Then came Friday. I was heading to visit a friend from college, which meant taking the interstate for the first time. 10 miles. Straight shot. I merged slowly, keeping my speed conservative. That's when the car lurched. The rattling grew louder. Frantic, almost panicked. I glanced down. The temperature gauge was climbing fast, edging into red. My stomach tightened. I eased off the accelerator, planning to take the next exit. The car didn't slow. A sharp, burning smell seeped through the vents. Not exhaust. Not rubber. Something worse. Smoke curled up from under the hood. My heart slammed against my ribs. I hit the brakes. The pedal dropped straight to the floor. No resistance. No slowing. Nothing. I pumped it once, twice, again. Exactly like my father had told me. The car kept surging forward at highway speed while traffic roared past me. I flipped on my hazard lights, trying to steer toward the shoulder. Horns blared. Truck swerved. Someone screamed something out a window. Then the smoke turned dark. Greasy. Pulled the emergency brake. The car shrieked but barely slowed. The exit ramp rushed toward me faster than I could process. And then I saw flames. Small at first. Orange flickers pushing through the gap in the hood. And more. Crawling. Growing. The engine made a violent metallic pop. I forced the wheel toward the shoulder. Gravel screaming under the tires as the car finally lurched to a stop. The hood was smoking heavily now. Fire licking up toward the windshield. I didn't turn the engine off. I just tried to get out. The seatbelt jammed. I yanked it. Pulled harder. Panic flooded my body as the flames grew closer. The heat pressing against the glass. For a horrifying second I thought this was it. Then the buckle released. I shoved the door open and ran. Barefoot, purse abandoned, phone forgotten. I didn't stop until I was far enough away to feel the heat on my back. The car exploded seconds later. Truck driver pulled over. Sirens wailed in the distance. I stood shaking on the side of the highway, watching the gift my parents gave me burn into nothing. And in that moment, a chilling thought crept in. They hadn't looked surprised that morning. They'd looked expectant. When I called my mother for help, her reaction confirmed my worst fear. The police wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and asked who I wanted to call. There was only one answer. My mother picked up on the second ring. "Hello. It's me," I whispered. "I'm on the highway." The car caught fire. There was a pause. Not panic. Not fear. Just silence. "Oh," she said finally. "I see." Another pause. "Is that all?" The words hit harder than the explosion. I need a ride," I said. "The police are here." She sighed. "Your father and I are in the middle of something. This is very inconvenient." Inconvenient. I hung up before she could say more. Kind officer drove me home. When we pulled into the driveway, both my parents were there. Lights on. Watching television. They hadn't been busy. They just hadn't wanted to come. In front of the officer, they performed concern. As soon as he left, the masks fell. "All that money wasted," my mother muttered. "I told you the car was delicate," my father said, as if I'd broken it on purpose. "I could have died," I said. "Don't be dramatic," he replied. That was when I knew. This wasn't neglect. This was something else. Something colder. The next day, I went to the only person who could tell me the truth. My Uncle David owned a garage across town. He was my father's brother, and the family embarrassment. Grease under his nails. No corporate ladder. No prestige. He listened silently as I told him everything. When I described the car, his face changed. "A man brought that Subaru to me a month ago," he said slowly. "Asked for an inspection." My stomach dropped. "It was junk," David continued. "Brake lines corroded. Fuel line loose. I told him it wasn't safe to drive." "Who was it?" "Yes." He didn't hesitate. "Your father." At the impound lot, David examined the burned remains. "The brake line was sliced," he said grimly. "Not all the way through. Just enough to fail under pressure." He pointed again. "The fuel line was loosened. Gas dripped onto the engine." He looked me in the eyes. "This car was sabotaged." I felt the world tilt. "They didn't just give you a bad car," he said. "They built a bomb." Armed with proof, I went home. Not to escape, but to confront them. I didn't hesitate. The moment Uncle David handed me the report, something inside me hardened. Fear gave way to clarity. I wasn't going home to beg, cry, or plead. I was going home to hear the truth, even if it destroyed whatever illusion of family I had left. The house was quiet when I walked in, painfully normal. The television murmured in the living room. My mother sat on the couch knitting. My father was in his recliner, glasses perched low on his nose. They looked annoyed to see me. "Dinner's in the fridge," my mother said without looking up. You'll have to heat it yourself. I'm not here for dinner, I replied. I crossed the room and turned off the television. The sudden silence felt heavy, suffocating. What is the meaning of this? My father demanded. I held up the manila envelope. I had the car inspected. By a professional. Something flickered across his face. Not guilt, not fear, irritation. Like I'd uncovered a mistake in a spreadsheet he thought was buried. And, he said. I pulled out the report but didn't hand it to them. I wanted to watch their faces. The brake line was deliberately sliced, I said calmly. Not enough to fail immediately. Just enough to collapse under pressure. My mother's knitting needles clattered to the floor. The fuel line was loosened, I continued. Gasoline dripped directly onto the engine. That's what caused the fire. That's absurd, my father snapped. Your uncle has always been jealous. He's lying. He remembered you, I said quietly. An accountant in his 50s. Condescending. Asked about selling the car. The color drained from my mother's face. She stood abruptly. Why would we ever do something like that? She demanded, voice trembling. That's insane. I took a step forward. Then tell me why. Silence. Fleming. My mother broke first. Her face twisted, not with guilt but with rage. Because you were a disappointment, she screamed. The words hit harder than the explosion ever had. We wanted another son, she continued, voice shaking with years of resentment finally spilling out. A boy for Ethan. Someone strong. Someone who mattered. She laughed bitterly. Instead, we got you. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't interrupt. You were a burden from the moment you were born, she said. Another mouth to feed. Another future we had to pay for. And for what? So you could grow up and leave anyway. I turned to my father, my voice barely a whisper. Dad. He didn't look conflicted. He looked resolved. Your mother is emotional, he said evenly. But she's not wrong. The room spun. Ethan is an investment, he continued. His success benefits this family. You don't. I stared at him, unable to speak. The car was an opportunity, he said coldly. An old vehicle. A tragic accident. Clean. Simple. My stomach dropped. Our financial obligations would have ended, he added. It would have solved a long-standing problem. He met my eyes without flinching. It's unfortunate you survived. Something inside me shattered, and then went completely numb. They weren't sorry. They were disappointed. I placed the report on the coffee table. You won't have to worry about me anymore. I turned and walked upstairs. Behind me I heard movement. Ethan had been listening. That night my brother learned the truth. And everything changed. Packed mechanically. My laptop. Every item folded and placed with a calm I didn't feel. Shock had stripped my emotions down to something cold and functional. I wasn't running away. I was removing myself from a threat. Halfway through zipping my suitcase, my bedroom door creaked open. Lily. Ethan stood there, eyes wide, face pale. He looked from me to the suitcase and back again. What's going on? He asked. Why are you packing? I didn't answer right away. I reached into my bag and pulled out the extra copy of Uncle David's report. Read this. He frowned, confused, but took it. As he read, I watched his expression change in real time. First confusion. Then disbelief. Then something darker. Horror creeping in around the edges. This can't be real, he whispered. Uncle David's exaggerating. Then ask them, I said quietly. Ask Mom and Dad if they sabotaged my car. He looked at me, panic rising in his eyes. They wouldn't. They couldn't. Go ask, I repeated. He bolted down the stairs. I stayed where I was listening. Mom. Dad. Ethan's voice trembled. What is this? Lily showed me a report. Uncle David says the car was sabotaged. Silence. Then my father's voice, controlled and dismissive. Your uncle is bitter. He's trying to cause problems. That's not what I asked, Ethan snapped. He says the brake line was cut. He says the fuel line was loosened. Tell me he's wrong. My mother's voice rose, sharp and defensive. Your sister is twisting things. She's always dramatic. Dramatic, Ethan shouted. She almost burned alive. I heard a loud thud. His fist hitting something. I saw her when she came home, he continued. You weren't worried about her. You were upset about the car. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. Was long, heavy. Did you do it? Ethan demanded. Just tell me the truth. Silence again. That was the answer. Oh my God, Ethan whispered. You actually did. My mother began to cry, not from guilt but from self-pity. We did it for this family, she sobbed. For your future. She's always been a drain. For me, Ethan yelled. You tried to murder my sister and you're blaming me? Watch your tone, my father warned. No, Ethan roared. I'm done watching my tone. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Ethan burst into my room, face streaked with tears and fury. He didn't say a word. He walked straight into his room, grabbed a duffel bag and started shoving clothes into it. Downstairs, my mother wailed his name. Ethan, please don't leave. He emerged moments later, bag slung over his shoulder. He looked at me, eyes red. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I never saw it. I should have protected you. He picked up my suitcases. Let's go. We walked downstairs together. Our parents stood in the entryway, desperation written across their faces. You can't leave, my father said. We need to talk. Ethan looked at them with something colder than anger. You didn't just try to kill my sister, he said. You killed this family. He opened the door. You talked about investments and losses, he continued. Here's your final balance. You lost both of your children. We walked out into the night. What came after was silence, and the beginning of a completely new life. The silence after we left was absolute. First, my parents called non-stop. Missed calls stacked on missed calls. Voicemails swung wildly between desperate apologies, angry accusations, and demands masked as concern. We never answered. To us, the people who raised us stopped existing the moment we walked out that door. Ethan and I stayed with Uncle David. He never once made us feel like burdens. He cleared space on the couch without comment, cooked massive breakfasts before opening the garage, and gave us what neither of our parents ever had: stability without conditions. The first few months felt unreal, like we were floating outside our bodies. Trauma does that. It dulls the edges just enough for survival. We talked late into the night, unpacking 20 years of shared history we'd somehow lived separately. Ethan told me about the pressure, the impossible expectations, how every mistake felt catastrophic because failure was never an option for him. I told him about invisibility, about birthdays that felt like chores, about achievements that disappeared overnight. We grieved together, not just for what happened but for the family we should have had. Eventually, we found a small 2-bedroom apartment near my university. Nothing fancy, thin walls, old carpet, but it was ours. Ethan transferred colleges and took a part-time job, shelving his own plans so I could finish my degree without interruption. For the first time, I had a real partner in my life. Not someone orbiting me, not someone towering above me, but someone walking beside me. My studies changed after that. Engineering stopped being abstract. Every lecture about safety systems, every diagram of brake lines and fuel routing felt personal. I poured myself into my senior project, designing a fail-safe braking mechanism for older vehicles, something that could prevent total failure even when parts were compromised. My professors called it ambitious, called it necessary. When I graduated, Uncle David and Ethan cheered louder than anyone else in the auditorium. I didn't look for my parents in the crowd. I already knew they wouldn't be there. Today, I work as a junior design engineer for an automotive company. My job is to anticipate failure, to imagine worst-case scenarios, and to design against them. Sometimes when I'm staring at a schematic, the memory of that burning car flashes through my mind. It doesn't haunt me anymore. It reminds me why I'm here. Ethan went back to school too. He's finishing his business degree and plans to help Uncle David expand the garage, turning it into a place built on honesty, not ego. Everything our parents' world never was. We're closer than ever now. Not because of shared blood but shared survival. I hear things through the grapevine. Small towns always talk. Our parents are still in that house, still telling their version of the story. But people notice when both children disappear. Friends drift away. Invitations stop coming. They invested everything in one child. And when they tried to erase the other, they lost them both. I don't feel anger anymore. Feel peace. What they tried to destroy became the reason I finally understood my worth. 2 years have passed since the night Ethan and I walked out of that house. The silence that followed became permanent. At first, my parents tried everything. Calls, messages, even handwritten letters. Their words shifted over time. Pleading turned into anger. Anger turned into blame. Blame turned into bitterness. We never responded. We didn't need closure from people who never saw us as human beings to begin with. To us, they stopped existing the moment they decided our lives could be measured like numbers on a balance sheet. Life didn't magically become easy after that. Healing never works that way. There were nights I woke up shaking, heart racing, smelling smoke that wasn't there. But those moments grew fewer and farther between. What replaced them was something stronger than fear. Purpose. Every day at work I help design systems meant to protect people. To anticipate failure before it happens. Break redundancy. Heat shielding. Safety triggers. I think about how many lives are quietly saved by details no one ever notices. And I smile. 'Cause someone like me needed those details once. Ethan and I still talk about it sometimes. Not obsessively. Not with rage. Just honestly. We've learned something most people never have to. That family isn't defined by blood, but by who chooses you when it matters. Uncle David is family. So are the friends who helped us rebuild. So are the people who saw our worth when the ones who made us couldn't. I hear updates about my parents occasionally. How the house feels empty. How old friends have faded away. How they don't talk much anymore. They wanted a home without a daughter. They got one. They just didn't expect the son to leave too. I don't feel satisfaction about their loneliness. Feel distance. Like watching a storm far out at sea. It exists, but it no longer has the power to drown me. They tried to erase me. Instead, they forced me to write my own life. And it turns out I'm very good at it. To anyone listening who has ever been made to feel like a disappointment, like a mistake, like an afterthought, hear this. Your worth is not decided by someone else's expectations. Their failure to love you is not proof that you are unlovable. It is proof that they failed. You are not a loss. You are not a burden. You are not an entry waiting to be erased. You are the profit they never counted. And if you're still standing after everything meant to destroy you, that's not luck. That's strength.